Abraham stood on the rugged peak of Moriah, the morning air biting with its chill. His heart pounded with each step he took. Beside him, Isaac walked, his son, his joy, his promised heir. The boy carried the wood for the burnt offering, glancing up at his father with trusting eyes. Abraham's hand trembled as he gripped the knife, the weight of God's command heavy upon his soul. Genesis 22, 1-2. Father, Isaac spoke, his voice soft, yet piercing the silence. We have the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Genesis 22, 7. Abraham swallowed hard, his throat dry as the desert wind. God himself will provide the lamb, my son, he replied, his voice steady but his heart torn. Genesis 22, 8. They reached the summit, the smell of earth and stone surrounding them. Abraham built an altar, each stone placed with a prayer. He bound Isaac, his beloved child, laying him upon the wood. The sun cast long shadows as it rose, its warmth at odds with the coldness of the task before him. Abraham raised the knife, his hand shaking, his soul crying out in silent agony. But faith held him, an unyielding tether to the Almighty's promise. The air was still, the moment suspended in eternity. And then a voice, clear, commanding, full of mercy, broke through the silence. Abraham, Abraham, Genesis 22:11. His hand paused, the blade hovering above the boy. Here I am, Abraham replied, his voice catching in his throat. Do not lay a hand on the boy, the voice continued, for now I know that you fear God. Genesis 22:12. Relief washed over Abraham like a gentle rain, his heart swelling with gratitude and awe. But to understand how we got here, to grasp the depth of this trial and the faith that carried Abraham, we must journey back to where it all began. In the land of Ur, where the Euphrates River whispered through reeds and clay brick walls held the warmth of the sun, Abram was born. The city bustled with activity. Traders from distant lands bartered spices and textiles, and the air was thick with the scent of incense and baking bread. Here, in a world governed by the rise and fall of the ziggurat, the people offered sacrifices to a pantheon of gods, seeking favor and fortune in the stars. Abram's father, Terah, was a man of commerce, his hands familiar with the weight of silver and the texture of fine wool. His family prospered in this thriving metropolis, yet amid the clamor, Abram felt an emptiness, a yearning that the idols of his father's house could not fill. He wandered the streets, his thoughts a quiet rebellion against the cacophony of idol worship, his heart stirred by whispers of a singular truth. The political landscape of Mesopotamia was a tapestry of city-states, each vying for power, each a kingdom unto itself. Kings and priests held sway, their decrees carving paths through the lives of common folk. Alliances shifted like the desert sands, and the shadow of conquest loomed ever-present. In this climate of uncertainty, Abram's family clung to their traditions, yet he was drawn to the unknown, to the voice that called him beyond the horizon. By the time Abram reached manhood, he was known for his integrity, his word as solid as the bricks that built Ur's great temples. He was a man of vision, his eyes ever scanning the heavens, seeking a sign. Sarai, his wife, shared his longing, her laughter a balm to his restless spirit. But there was a sorrow that shadowed their union. Sarai was barren, her womb silent amid the cries of the city's children. Yet, in their hearts, they nurtured a hope that defied the silence. One night, as the stars blazed fiercely in the velvet sky, Abram stood alone on the rooftop of his house. The city below was a sea of flickering lamps, the night air cool against his skin. It was there in the stillness that the voice spoke to him, clear and undeniable. Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, it said, and go to the land I will show you. Genesis 12:1. The words resonated within him, a melody of promise and purpose. The call was audacious, demanding a faith that defied reason, yet Abram knew it was the voice of truth. He gathered Sarai and Lot, his nephew, and shared the vision. Their hearts trembled at the thought of abandoning all they knew, yet they were kindled by the promise of a new beginning. The journey to Canaan would be long and fraught with uncertainty, but Abram's resolve was firm. His spirit, buoyed by the covenant, whispered in the night. As they prepared to leave, the city of Ur continued its rhythms. Children played in the streets, merchants haggled over wares, and the temple priests performed their rituals. Yet for Abram, every sound, every sight, was colored by the knowledge that he was stepping into a destiny ordained by the divine. The desert stretched before them, vast and unforgiving, but each step was a testament to faith, each mile a thread in the tapestry of God's plan. They traveled by caravan, the camels laden with provisions, their feet stirring the dust of ancient paths. The sun beat down relentlessly, and the nights were filled with the howls of distant jackals. Yet in the stillness of the desert, Abram found solace. The land was harsh, but it spoke to him of resilience, of endurance. He felt the presence of God in the wind, in the stars that watched over them, silent witnesses to their journey. The journey was not without trials. They encountered tribes who eyed them with suspicion, their weapons a silent warning. Famine swept through the land, and fear gripped their hearts. But in every challenge, Abram sought the counsel of God, his prayers rising like incense in the desert air. His faith wavered at times, yet it was in these moments of vulnerability that the voice reassured him, promising descendants as numerous as the stars. As they approached Canaan, the land of promise, Abram's heart swelled with anticipation. The hills rolled gently under a sky vast and blue, a land ripe with potential. But it was not uninhabited. The Canaanites dwelled there, their cities fortified and formidable. Yet Abram's courage did not falter, for the voice had spoken, and he trusted in the promise that this land would be his inheritance. Abram built altars along the way, markers of faith and devotion. In Shechem, by the great tree of Mamre, he paused and offered sacrifices, the smoke curling heavenward, a fragrant offering to the God who had called him. It was there that God appeared to him again, affirming the promise that this land would belong to his offspring. Genesis 12:7. The words were a balm to Abram's soul, a reassurance that his journey was not in vain. As Abram settled in Canaan, the years passed like the shifting sands. He grew in wealth and influence, a chieftain among his people. Yet his heart yearned for the fulfillment of the promise, for a son, for the legacy of a nation. Sarai too was restless, her laughter now tinged with the ache of unfulfilled dreams. But in their waiting, they learned to trust the timing of God, to hold fast to the covenant that had brought them to this land. The days turned to years, and Abram's faith deepened, his trust in God's plan unwavering. He walked the land, feeling the soil beneath his feet, the promise of generations yet to come. And though the path was uncertain, the voice that had called him from Ur still guided his steps, a beacon of hope in the vast expanse of the unknown. In the quiet moments as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars emerged, Abram would gaze at the heavens, his heart full of gratitude and expectation. For he knew that in the unfolding tapestry of his life, he was but a thread in the grand design of the divine, a testament to the power of faith and the enduring promise of God's covenant. The journey from Ur to Canaan was long and arduous. Dust rose in clouds under the feet of Abram's caravan, the camels laden with goods and tents. The sun burned overhead, a relentless reminder of the divine call that had set them on this path. Abram, now known as Abraham, led his people with steadfast faith, his heart anchored in the promise of God. "I will make of you a great nation," said the Lord, and Abraham believed, holding on to these words as they traveled the desolate stretches of desert. Genesis 12:2. His wife Sarai rode beside him, her eyes scanning the horizon. Though barren, she carried a quiet hope that the promise would one day be fulfilled. Around them, the sound of laughter and chatter flowed through the caravan. The mingling voices of family and servants filled the air, a testament to Abraham's growing influence and the community drawn to his unwavering faith. As they approached the land of Canaan, the scent of blooming wildflowers mixed with the earthy aroma of the soil. This land was unlike the bustling city of Ur, but it held the promise of a future ordained by God. Abraham's followers saw him as a man chosen by the Almighty, a beacon of faith in a world of uncertainty. They whispered of his encounters with God, tales that spread along the trade routes they traveled. In the evenings, under the canopy of stars, Abraham would gather his people. The crackling of the fire would punctuate his words as he recounted the call from God. "The Lord appeared to me," he would say, his voice deep and measured, "and promised this land to my descendants." Genesis 12:7. The people listened, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames, their hearts warmed by the hope of divine favor. Abraham's growth was not just in numbers, but in wisdom. Each step in faith was a lesson learned, a stone laid on the path that God had set. When they reached Bethel, Abraham built an altar, a monument to the divine promise and a place of worship. The smell of burnt offerings lingered in the air, a sweet aroma ascending to heaven as a testament to their devotion. There was a turning point in Abraham's journey when famine struck the land. The scarcity of food drove them to Egypt, a land of abundance, but also of potential peril. As they entered Egypt, Abraham feared for Sarai's safety. Her beauty was renowned, and he worried the Egyptians might kill him to claim her. "Say you are my sister," he instructed her, a decision born of both wisdom and fear. Genesis 12:13. The Pharaoh indeed took notice of Sarai, and she was brought into his house. Yet God intervened, afflicting Pharaoh and his household with great plagues. Pharaoh, realizing the truth, confronted Abraham. "Why did you not tell me she was your wife?" He demanded, his voice echoing in the halls of his palace. Abraham bowed his head, acknowledging his misstep, yet grateful for God's protection. Released from Egypt with riches and more followers, Abraham's wealth and influence grew. His flocks and herds multiplied, and his reputation spread across the lands. Yet with growth came strife. The land could not support both Abraham's and Lot's growing herds, and disputes arose among their herdsmen. The air was thick with tension, the bleating of sheep and lowing of cattle underscoring the need for resolution. Abraham, ever wise, approached Lot with a proposal. "Let there be no strife between you and me," he said, his voice calm and conciliatory. "If you go to the left, I will go to the right." Genesis 13:8-9. Lot chose the fertile plains of Jordan, leaving Abraham with the rugged hills of Canaan. Yet Abraham knew that God's promise was not in the richness of the land, but in his word. As Lot departed, God spoke to Abraham once more. "Lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are," the Lord commanded. "For all the land that you see I give to you and your descendants forever." Genesis 13:15. Abraham stood on the heights, the wind rustling his cloak, and surveyed the land that stretched before him. His heart swelled with faith, his spirit buoyed by the promise renewed. Abraham's journey was marked by altars and encounters, each a testament to his growing relationship with God. Yet it was a life not without trials. The kings of the region waged war, and Lot was taken captive. Upon hearing this, Abraham armed his trained servants, 318 men born in his house, and pursued the invaders. The clamor of battle rang through the night, swords clashing and men shouting as Abraham's forces fought bravely to rescue Lot. Victorious, Abraham returned, meeting the mysterious Melchizedek, king of Salem and priest of God Most High. Melchizedek blessed Abraham, offering bread and wine, and Abraham gave him a tenth of all. This encounter was a turning point, affirming his role as a man of God, blessed and a blessing to others. Genesis 14:18-20. As Abraham's journey continued, so did his growth in faith and wisdom. He was a man who knew the voice of God, who followed where others would falter. His life was a tapestry of divine encounters and human struggles, each thread woven with purpose. The people around him saw the hand of God at work, a testament to the faith that moved mountains and the promise that endured. And so, in the quiet of the night, as stars twinkled above and the world around him slumbered, Abraham found solace in the enduring promise of God. His heart was full, his spirit at peace, knowing that he was part of a story much greater than himself, a story that would echo through the ages, a legacy of faith and obedience. The rise of Abraham was not just in wealth or followers, but in the deepening of his covenant with the Almighty, a covenant that would stand the test of time. The sun hung low over the hills of Canaan, casting long shadows across the tents pitched at the oak of Mamre. Abraham sat quietly by the entrance of his tent, the air cool against his skin as evening descended. The flocks murmured in the distance, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of dry earth and olive wood. It was here, under the vast canopy of stars, that God had first promised him descendants as numerous as the stars above. Genesis 15:5. Yet, the promise seemed as distant as those stars, for the years had stretched on, and Sarai remained barren. It was in this quiet waiting that a crisis of faith began to brew. 10 years had passed since the call from Ur, and still, no heir. Sarai, her beauty undiminished by time, grew restless with each passing season. Her heart ached for a child, a tangible sign of God's promise. In the tent's dim light, she voiced her anguish to Abraham, her words laced with sorrow and resolve. "Perhaps," she whispered, "the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go to my maidservant Hagar. Perhaps I shall obtain children by her." Genesis 16, verse 2. The night was thick with silence as Abraham pondered Sarai's proposal. Hagar, the Egyptian maidservant, was young and strong, capable of bearing a child. Yet Abraham's heart was torn. Was this truly God's plan or a test of his faith? The decision weighed heavily, but Abraham consented, seeking solace in the thought that perhaps this was the way the promise would unfold. Hagar conceived, and soon the camp hummed with the news. But joy turned to discord, as Sarai saw Hagar's growing belly as a rebuke. Jealousy festered, and Sarai, feeling diminished, dealt harshly with Hagar, driving her to flee into the wilderness. Genesis 16:6. The desert wind stung her face, and the vast emptiness mirrored the turmoil within. Yet by a spring of water, the angel of the Lord found her, speaking words of comfort and prophecy. "Return to your mistress," the angel said, "and submit to her. I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, that they shall be too many to count." Genesis 16:9-10. Hagar returned, and in due time bore Abraham a son named Ishmael. The camp rejoiced, yet Abraham's heart remained divided. He loved Ishmael, but the promise of an heir through Sarai lingered. 13 years passed, and Abraham, now 99, found himself once more in the presence of the Almighty. The Lord appeared to him, reaffirming the covenant, changing his name to Abraham and Sarai to Sarah, promising that she would bear a son, Isaac. Genesis 17:19. Abraham laughed, the sound echoing under the open sky, a mixture of disbelief and wonder. How could a man so old and a woman beyond childbearing years bring forth life? But God was not bound by earthly constraints. "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" he asked, a question that settled like a gentle reassurance in Abraham's soul. Genesis 18:14. As time moved forward, the heat of the noonday sun beat down upon Abraham's camp. 3 visitors approached, their arrival unannounced yet anticipated. Abraham, recognizing the divine nature of his guests, hurried to offer them hospitality, a practice ingrained in his being. The aroma of roasted calf and freshly baked bread filled the air as the visitors spoke of Sarah's impending joy. Genesis 18:10. Sarah, listening from the tent, laughed silently to herself. Her laughter was not of joy, but of doubt. Could this truly be her fate, to become a mother in her old age? Yet the Lord heard her laughter and questioned it, gently rebuking her disbelief. "At the appointed time, I will return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son." Genesis 18:14. The days turned into weeks, and soon the laughter of a newborn filled the tent. Isaac was born, and the promise was fulfilled. Yet the joy was bittersweet, as tensions between Sarah and Hagar resurfaced. Sarah, protective of her son, demanded that Hagar and Ishmael be cast out. Abraham's heart was heavy, torn between his love for Ishmael and his duty to Isaac. God's voice came to him in the night, offering guidance and peace. "Do not be distressed because of the boy and your maidservant. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the maidservant into a nation also, because he is your offspring." Genesis 21, verse 12-13. With a heavy heart, Abraham rose early, providing Hagar and Ishmael with bread and a skin of water. The desert awaited them, vast and unforgiving. Yet, as they wandered, God's promise to Abraham held true. In the wilderness, Hagar despaired, but the angel of the Lord called out, opening her eyes to a well of water and a future for Ishmael, who would grow to be a great archer and father of nations. Genesis 21:17-20. The crisis had tested Abraham's faith, his decisions fraught with human frailty and divine purpose. Yet through each trial, God's presence remained steadfast, guiding him through the shadows of doubt and into the light of his promises. Abraham's journey was far from over, but the threads of faith, obedience, and divine intervention wove through every chapter of his life, a tapestry of God's enduring covenant. As the stars emerged once more over Canaan, Abraham sat by the tent, a quiet peace settling over him. He had faced betrayal, persecution, and the testing of faith, yet through it all, God remained faithful. The night was calm, the air cool against his skin. Abraham closed his eyes, resting in the knowledge that God's purposes were unfolding, one promise at a time. And so the story of Abraham continued, a legacy of faith etched into the fabric of time. The sun stood high in the sky, casting its warm glow over the camp at Mamre. Abraham sat by the entrance of his tent, his eyes scanning the horizon. The land was quiet, except for the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze and the distant bleating of sheep. Suddenly, 3 figures appeared, walking steadily toward him. Their presence was striking, each step purposeful, as if the earth itself welcomed them. Abraham rose quickly, his heart quickening. Though he was nearly 100 years old, his spirit was as vibrant as the day God first spoke to him in Ur. He hurried to meet the visitors, bowing low before them, his voice filled with reverence. "My Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant." Genesis 18:3. The men paused, their faces calm and knowing. Abraham, with the hospitality he was known for, urged them to rest under the tree. He called for Sarah, who was inside the tent, her hands busy with the tasks of the day. "Quick, make ready 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes." Genesis 18:6, he instructed, his voice carrying the urgency of sacred duty. As Sarah worked, Abraham ran to the herd, selecting a tender calf, and gave it to a servant to prepare. The meal was soon ready, a simple feast of bread, meat, and milk, laid before the guests beneath the shade of the great oak. The aroma of the meal mingled with the scent of the earth, a testament to the bond between Abraham's faith and the land God had promised him. As they ate, one of the visitors spoke, his words as unexpected as rain in the desert. "Where is Sarah, your wife?" he asked, glancing toward the tent. Abraham gestured toward it, his mind briefly wondering at the question. "Next year, I will surely return to you, and Sarah your wife shall have a son." Genesis 18, verse 10. The visitor declared, his voice carrying the weight of divine certainty. From inside the tent, hidden from view, Sarah listened. Her heart, long accustomed to barrenness, skipped a beat. She laughed silently to herself, the sound mingling with disbelief, for she was well beyond the years of childbearing. "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure?" she thought. Yet the visitor knew her thoughts. "Why did Sarah laugh?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" Genesis 18:13-14. Abraham's heart swelled with hope. He had learned to trust in the promises of God, even when they seemed impossible. Sarah, caught between doubt and wonder, hesitated. "I did not laugh," she said, emerging from the shadows of the tent, her eyes meeting the gaze of the stranger. "Nay, but you did laugh." Genesis 18:15, he replied, his voice neither condemning nor harsh, but filled with a certainty that pierced through her disbelief. In that moment, the promise took root in her heart, a seed of faith planted by the Creator himself. As the meal concluded, the visitors rose, their purpose not yet fulfilled. They turned their gaze toward Sodom, where Lot, Abraham's nephew, had settled. The air grew heavy with anticipation, the weight of unspoken truths pressing upon the land. Abraham walked with them, his feet stirring the dust on the path, his heart sensing the gravity of what lay ahead. "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do?" The Lord considered, his voice carrying the echoes of justice and mercy. For Abraham was to become a great and mighty nation, and through him all nations of the earth would be blessed. Genesis 18:18. The covenant between God and Abraham was not just a promise of descendants, but a call to righteousness. The Lord spoke, revealing the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah, their sin grievous beyond measure. "I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me." Genesis 18:21, he declared, his voice a blend of sorrow and resolve. Abraham paused, his mind racing. He knew Lot lived in Sodom, and his heart ached with the thought of destruction. Standing before the Lord, he spoke, his voice steady yet urgent. "Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" Genesis 18:23. He pleaded, invoking the justice of the Almighty, asking if 50 righteous souls could spare the city. The Lord listened, his response patient and compassionate. "If I find at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Genesis 18:26. Abraham, emboldened by mercy, continued to intercede, reducing the number, testing the bounds of divine grace. 45, 40, 30, 20, until only 10 remained. "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." Genesis 18:32, the Lord promised, his voice a solemn vow. Abraham's plea was not just for Lot, but for the very essence of justice and mercy. As the Lord departed, the air filled with the weight of what was to come. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the land. Abraham returned to his tent, his heart a mixture of hope and solemnity. The visitor's promise lingered in the air like a sweet fragrance, mingling with the scent of the earth and the memory of laughter. In the quiet of the evening, Abraham prayed, his words a melody of faith and intercession. That night, as stars appeared one by one, the world held its breath. The turning point had come, a moment where faith touched the divine and the promise of life echoed across generations. Abraham lay beneath the vast sky, the cool night air brushing against his skin. He closed his eyes, trusting in the God who had called him from Ur, who had promised him descendants as numerous as the stars above. And so the land lay still, cradling the promise within its heart, as Abraham and Sarah dreamed of a son yet to be born, a child of laughter and faith. In the silence, the world awaited the dawn, a new day shaped by the covenant of God, where miracles breathed life into the impossible. The sun dipped low over the plains of Mamre, casting long shadows across the tents of Abraham's camp. The air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and the distant murmur of sheep settling for the night. As the day gave way to twilight, a profound stillness descended, a calm that echoed the promise fulfilled, yet whispered of the trials that lay ahead. Sarah, now cradling the promise of God in her arms, gazed at her newborn son, Isaac. The laughter that had once bubbled from disbelief now flowed from the deepest wells of joy. Genesis 21:6, Sarah declared, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." The child, a living testament to God's faithfulness, represented a new beginning. Yet, as with every dawn, shadows lingered at the edges. Abraham stood at the threshold of his tent, eyes tracing the horizon where the three visitors had vanished, their presence still palpable. His heart swelled with gratitude, yet the weight of his covenant with God pressed upon him, a covenant that had demanded much and would demand more still. The land of Canaan stretched before him, vast and daunting, a canvas for promises yet to be painted. In the quiet of the night, Abraham's thoughts turned to the past. Memories of Ur, of journeys fraught with uncertainty, of promises whispered under starlit skies, danced like specters. But it was not the past that held sway over him now. It was the future, etched with the hope of nations yet unborn. Genesis 15:5, God had taken him outside and promised that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars. In Isaac, this promise found its first light. The camp was alive with the hum of life, servants tending to evening tasks, the gentle lowing of cattle, the distant bleat of a lamb. Hagar, once cast into the wilderness with her son Ishmael, now lingered at the edges. Her heart, torn between the love for her child and the pain of separation, found solace in the knowledge that God had not abandoned them. Genesis 21:17, an angel had called to her in the desert, assuring her that Ishmael too would become a great nation. As night deepened, the air cooled, carrying with it the scent of the earth, rich and fertile. The promise of rain hung heavy in the clouds, a reminder of God's provision. Abraham, weary from the weight of leadership, sought solace in prayer. He knelt upon the cool ground, the soil a testament to God's promise of land and legacy. Genesis 13:4-15. God had told him to look around, for all the land he saw would be given to him forever. The night wore on, and sleep embraced the camp. Yet, even in rest, dreams of divine encounters and celestial promises filled the hearts of those who dwelled there. It was a time of rebuilding, a time to lay foundations not just of stone and tent, but of faith and hope. As dawn broke, the camp stirred to life. The sun, a golden orb on the horizon, heralded a new day. Birds sang a chorus of praise, their voices mingling with the morning breeze. Life, in its cyclical dance, resumed, tasks to be done, flocks to tend, children to nurture. Yet beneath the rhythm of daily life, the story of Abraham and his unwavering faith echoed in every heart. The legacy of Abraham was more than the land he walked or the son he cherished. It was a legacy of faith, passed from one generation to the next, a beacon for all who sought God amidst the turmoil of life. Genesis 22:17, God had sworn to multiply his offspring as the stars in the sand. And so the story carried on. etched in the hearts of those who lived it and those who heard it, each retelling a thread in the tapestry of God's unfolding plan, a plan that would, in time, lead to another hill, another covenant, sealed not with the blood of lambs, but with the blood of God's own Son. As the day unfolded, the camp buzzed with preparation for the journey ahead. Abraham, ever the sojourner, knew that the path of faith was one of movement, of leaving and arriving, of holding on and letting go. His eyes, though dimmed with age, shone with a light that spoke of encounters with the divine. Each step he took was grounded in the assurance of God's promises, promises that transcended time and space. In the years that followed, the story of Abraham became the cornerstone of a nation. It was told around campfires and in the quiet of homes, a story of faith and obedience, of trials and triumphs. The descendants of Abraham, scattered across lands and cultures, carried with them the seed of faith, a faith that would blossom anew in the fullness of time. As evening fell once more over the land of Canaan, the stars emerged, each one a silent witness to the covenant made so long ago. The night air was cool, wrapping the camp in a gentle embrace. From the shadows, the past whispered its lessons, while the future beckoned with promises yet to be fulfilled. And so the tale of Abraham, the friend of God, continued to unfold, a story woven into the very fabric of history, a story of a man, a promise, and a God who is ever faithful. As the camp settled into slumber, the wind carried the faint echoes of a promise, one that would endure through the ages, guiding all who sought the light of faith. With the dawn of each new day, the legacy of Abraham lived on, etched in the sands of time, whispered in the prayers of the faithful, and written indelibly in the annals of history. A legacy not of stone or monument, but of faith, a faith that endures, a faith that speaks of a God who calls, who promises, and who fulfills. As the camp drifted into peaceful rest, the story of Abraham lingered, a gentle lullaby of faith and promise, carrying listeners into the quiet embrace of sleep. As the dawn broke over the camp, the new day brought with it a quiet anticipation. The world had shifted for Abraham, and the legacy he was to leave behind was vast and enduring. In the years that followed, his name would echo through the ages, whispered in reverence and awe. His story, etched in the hearts of many, would become a cornerstone of faith for generations. In the centuries after Abraham's life, the narrative of his journey and covenant with God became a foundation for the Israelites, his descendants through Isaac. They remembered him as the father of their nation, the one who first heard the call of God and obeyed. The land of Canaan, promised to Abraham and his progeny, became the land of Israel, a beacon of the divine promise fulfilled. As the Israelites wandered through the wilderness, the story of Abraham was recounted around their fires. In the book of Genesis, they read of God's promise to make Abraham's descendants as numerous as the stars. Genesis 15:5. His faith was their example, a guiding light through hardships and trials. The Israelites saw in Abraham a figure of unwavering belief, someone who trusted God's plan even when it seemed impossible. Abraham's legacy also extended to those outside the lineage of Isaac. Through Ishmael, Abraham became a patriarch to the Ishmaelites, a people who would spread across the Arabian Peninsula. In the Islamic tradition, Abraham, known as Ibrahim, is revered as a prophet and a model of submission to God's will. The Quran tells of his devotion and the trials he endured, emphasizing his commitment to monotheism. His willingness to sacrifice his son, interpreted as Ishmael in this tradition, during Eid al-Adha is a testament to his faith, celebrated annually by Muslims around the world. In Christianity, Abraham's faith is a central theme. The Apostle Paul, in his letters to the Romans and Galatians, highlights Abraham's belief as a precursor to the faith required in the New Covenant through Jesus Christ. Paul argues that righteousness comes through faith, not works, using Abraham as a primary example. Abraham's story, thus, is woven into the fabric of Christian theology, symbolizing the power of faith to transcend the law and bring about salvation. Through these traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, Abraham's legacy is a tapestry of faith, obedience, and divine promise. His life is a testament to the belief that God is active, present, and faithful to his word. The story of Abraham is not just a historical account, but a living narrative that continues to inspire millions across the globe. The lands that Abraham once walked, Canaan, Mamre, have changed over time, yet they remain sacred to those who trace their spiritual heritage to him. Archaeological discoveries, such as those in have unearthed remnants of the world he inhabited, providing glimpses into the life and times of this patriarch. These findings, along with the ancient texts, affirm the profound impact of Abraham's journey on the religious and cultural landscape of the region. As the sands of time shifted, so too did the interpretations of Abraham's story. His legacy has been explored and expanded upon by theologians, scholars, and believers. Each tradition has its own understanding, but all agree on the central themes of faith and obedience. Abraham's willingness to leave his homeland, to trust in God's plan, and to strive for righteousness serves as an enduring lesson for all who seek to walk in faith. The covenant made with Abraham was not just a promise of land and descendants, it was a promise of blessings to all nations through him. Genesis 12:3. This promise finds fulfillment in the diverse faith communities that honor Abraham today. His story is a reminder that faith can bridge divides, bringing together people of different backgrounds in shared reverence for this patriarch. As the evening shadows lengthen and the cool breeze whispers through the trees, the story of Abraham settles into the hearts of those who listen. His legacy is not just in the lands he traveled or the descendants he fathered, but in the faith he embodied, a faith that calls out across time, inviting all to trust in the unseen and to believe in the promises of God. With each retelling, the story of Abraham grows quieter, more contemplative, inviting reflection and meditation. His life, a tapestry of divine encounters and human struggles, speaks to the enduring nature of faith, a faith that rests not in human strength, but in the steadfast promises of God. As you drift into sleep, let the story of Abraham be a gentle reminder of the power of faith, the assurance of things hoped for, and the conviction of things not seen. In the stillness, find peace in the knowledge that God is faithful, that his promises endure, and that, like Abraham, we too are called to journey in faith, trusting in the one who holds the stars and names them one by one. Rest now in the quiet assurance of God's presence, as the story of Abraham, a beacon of faith, continues to illuminate the path for those who seek him. In the quiet aftermath of Abraham's journey, the night sky stretched wide above Canaan. Stars shimmered like ancient promises, each one a testament to the faith that had guided him. Abraham's life, a tapestry of faith and courage, wove together moments of doubt and divine assurance. His story, rich with trials and triumphs, whispered the timeless truth. Faith is the bridge between the seen and the unseen. Abraham stood as a figure defined not only by his obedience but by his relentless pursuit of a promise. God called him to leave all he knew, to journey into the unknown, a call echoed in Genesis 12:1. Each step he took was a step into the mystery of God's plan, a step away from certainty and into faith's embrace. In this journey, he encountered doubt and fear, yet his heart remained steadfastly anchored in the divine covenant. In moments of silence, when the desert winds stilled and the world seemed to hold its breath, Abraham listened for God's voice. These whispers, soft yet profound, guided him through the darkest nights. His story reminds us that faith is not the absence of doubt, but the courage to trust amidst uncertainty. It is the willingness to believe in what cannot be seen, to hope in promises yet fulfilled. As we close our eyes tonight, let Abraham's journey be a gentle reminder that faith is an invitation to walk with God. It is the courage to step into the unknown, to trust in the unfolding of a divine story written across the canvas of our lives. The stars above Canaan continue to speak, of promises kept, of faith rewarded, of a God who calls us by name. Let these truths cradle your heart as you drift into sleep, knowing that the God of Abraham watches over you, tenderly weaving your own story of faith and promise.